I hope you can hear me and can see the screen as well in
Yeah, yeah,
presentation.
we can hear you and the presentation is visible.
Okay, welcome back everyone. We are going to, what we covered so far were some of the fundamentals of the differences between the architectures, and also one of the reasons why the way the architectures work, and how different applications can look at an architecture from different perspective, based on the memory configurations, based on the compute configurations, and what kind of speed ups that they can expect out of it. Now getting into the CUDA itself, as it was pointed out some time back by one of the participants, is that why the name GPUs, right? So the name GPU comes from the part which we said was that it was for the initial part of the offloading for graphics, and that's why the name GPU comes into the picture. But later on, it was realized that it can be used for other purposes also. One of the developers called as Mark Harris, he basically identified that finally GPUs has a lot of compute engines. Why don't I make use of GPUs for writing some general purpose codes like sorting and other kinds of algorithms like histogram and all? And he basically wrote some programs using the graphics pipeline. If you are in this field of graphics, you would understand there are other ways in which you have to write programs like OpenGL and recently Vulkan, DirectX 11. All these are different ways of using and writing program for graphics pipelines. So even though you are using the same compute, it's just a different standard or different language to make use of that compute. So it was realized by this researcher that I can use this graphics pipeline, and he used the graphics pipeline language itself using OpenGL. He wrote some shader programs to make use of GPUs, but fundamentally he was not doing a graphics operation. He was basically doing an operation which was more general purpose in nature, like histogram and other sorting and other kinds of calculation. Once this was identified, there were multiple doors and multiple requests kept on pouring, and NVIDIA kind of identified this, and we created something called as CUDA. CUDA stands for Compute Unified Device Architecture, and it primarily is a source of way of writing code on the GPU for general purpose computation. When I say general purpose, what I basically mean is kind of non graphics kind of applications where you're doing sorting, fast Fourier transforms, stencil operations, and all those things like this, right? So, as the name stands, Compute Unified Device Architecture. It's an architecture. Like your CPU has an architecture, x86 and x64 from Intel and AMD basically are an architecture, right? The architecture will have its own definitions, like how does the instruction set looks like and all those things. Similarly, the GPU architecture is Compute Unified Device Architecture. It has its own instruction set and everything, right? It has its own stack in terms of compiler. It has its own stack in terms of drivers and everything above it, so that you can target the GPU, right? Like one of the architecture, and it is from bottom up built for doing one thing, which is parallel computing. And as I said, one of the applications of parallel computing is astronomy or astrophysics. Similarly, there are other kinds of applications of parallel computing. Like one of the most recent trends is artificial intelligence. In fact, it was not NVIDIA who identified the application of artificial intelligence was on GPUs. It was one of the researchers who was participating in a challenge, which is a computer vision challenge, which brought back deep learning. What we did was, NVIDIA basically is a technology company or a platforms company. We exposed CUDA, and the users use CUDA for different applications like artificial intelligence. One of the latest applications of it is 5G networking. You see, there's a lot of buzz around 5G networking, and 5G networking actually demands a lot of computation, and it also has a lot of parts which is parallel computing in nature. So once you devise a parallel programming model or architecture from grounds up, one of the best thing which can happen is that it can be applied for different applications. Whether it is genomics, whether it is astrophysics, or it is AI, does not matter. All of them are applications of parallel computing. And that's what CUDA is all about. And one thing about CUDA definitely is that one of the NVIDIA's thing is that most of our frameworks and whatever investment that we do is basically all either open source or they are free to use. The one where I'm going to show you a demo is using one of the framework or the SDKs, which is called as NVIDIA HPC SDK. NVIDIA HPC SDK is a set of collection of different segments which are required by any developer who would like to target a GPU, especially in this field of high performance computing. If you're working in pure artificial intelligence, you will have a different stack there. And if you have that question, I can definitely answer it, but I don't plan to cover it in this session. Like NVIDIA HPC SDK comes with compilers like NVCC for C, NVC for both C, NVC++ for C++, and we also have Fortran-based compiler. Similarly, we have math libraries which are present for, so over time, the community of GPU computing has evolved to an extent that majority of the parallel computing routines have already been written by someone. Like if you write using FFT, then you will just use our library called as cuFFT for doing parallel FFT on the GPUs. If you are doing any matrix operation, you would use our library called as cuBLAS. If you are doing random number generator, there is a library cuRANG. If you are using solvers in CFD, we have a library called as cuSolver or AMGX. What I'm trying to say is that the community has basically developed so many of them. In fact, in artificial intelligence, we don't expect anybody to write a parallel code because we have already written a library called as cuDNN or NCCL or other libraries like that, where your frameworks like TensorFlow, PyTorch, or any of these can directly call our library where we have already written a parallel code for you. So the best choice is always to use the existing libraries before starting from scratch. You learned MPI. MPI plus CUDA or MPI plus X is a very common domain, which a common way of writing codes. Nowadays, many of these systems come with a GPU. So if you have a CPU plus GPU system, and if you have a cluster, you can use MPI for distributing the work across the cluster, and within that particular node, you can use CUDA or OpenACC or OpenMP, different methods to target GPUs. So it's going to be MPI plus something is the most common way of writing code nowadays. There is an alternative by NVIDIA called as NCCL, NVIDIA Collective Communication Library, which is very similar to MPI, and it understands the topology of your overall cluster very efficiently, and it chooses a very optimal path on how to transfer the data. And it's hidden behind the scene by our library called as NCCL, and it looks very similar to MPI. It is very heavily used in AI, but there are various applications of it to be found in the high performance computing traditional simulation environment as well. You can code GPUs in different approaches, and that's what we call as N ways to GPU programming. Like in the CPU world also, the first thing that you will choose is whether you want to write in C or Fortran or Python or other kinds of languages like Julia, whatever not. Inside that, if you choose to write a parallel code, you may have different choices. Like you could code in multi-core using pthreads, or you can use OpenMP, or you can use OpenACC. Similarly, you can use very lower level detailed programming also. NVIDIA HPC SDK provides you all different kind of choices based on your convenience and based on the requirement that you have. And we are going to cover that one by one. No parallel code can be written with help of any of the tools. If you write parallel code, it's bound to have some bugs. So you need a debugger. We have debuggers which are integrated and which are separately there also. You would have heard about GDB in Linux. Similarly, you have an integration of CUDA inside it called as CUDA-GDB. where you can debug both your CPU as well as on GPU. One of the most prominent things which any parallel programmer should use is profiling tools. Profiling tools helps you give insight inside your application. And if you're working on any of the parallel application, you should not depend on your gut feeling. You should use your profilers to identify the hotspots inside your application to make sure that you are going to project how much speed up you're going to get before even starting to write parallel code. If you don't do that, you will end up on some numbers which are not justifiable maybe. Like why did I get 2x and not 3x? Why did I get 8x and not 15x on a GPU or on a CPU? Does not matter. For any parallel programmers, all the parallel programmers should understand how to use profiling tools. The solution from NVIDIA in the profiling space is called as Nsight. There are two kinds of profilers there, and we will see in case we have time to demonstrate to you how to use these profiling tools. Along with that, I'm going to show you a quick demo of how you can deploy your things without having to do any kind of installation on your own system via something called as containers. As I told to you that there are different ways to GPU programming. The first and the most convenient way for anyone is to use the existing libraries, because there is a lot of effort which has been put by computer scientists who are working, who know the hardware pretty well, to derive and write an optimal code. In fact, some of these libraries are written at assembly level, not even at the level of C or Java or Python. So they are optimized to its max. Rather than reinventing the wheel, it is always a good idea to use the existing libraries. The latest and the greatest which has come out of a couple of years is the standards themselves have understood that they need to integrate concurrency and parallelism as fundamental part of the language itself. Like GPU, like C++ and Fortran have identified C++11, C++14 and C++17 standard. Any compiler which implements this standard have to have a parallel implementation of STL, standard template library, inside it, without which they are not compliant with the standard. Which means that the standard language itself, one of the earliest language which understood that parallelism is the fundamental key to all this was Java. Java by default, the language supported concurrency as part of the language itself. C++ also has come to a level where we can say that parallelism is part of the language itself. Similarly, Fortran. If you are in the Fortran space, Fortran 2007 already introduces a concept called a do concurrent, where instead of using a normal do loop, you can append it with do concurrent and it is supposed to run it in parallel. Where does it run in parallel is a different question. The implementation is basically left up to the compiler implementations. Like if you use NVIDIA compiler, NVFortran or NVCC or NVC++, you can target NVIDIA GPUs. If you use some other implementation by other compiler guys, you would be able to target even multi-cores. So your code remains portable and you can target different hardwares. And the same is supported by NVIDIA. Behind the scenes, it will use CUDA, but at a higher level, the compilers have to support this construct, which are part of the standard language. You can think of it as the future, because once you have started writing in a standard language, you don't need to know something new. Obviously, it comes with its own limitation. If it is part of a language, it has to be generic in nature. You can't add constructs which are very specific to a particular hardware, or is it not general in nature, which means you might end up sacrificing certain amount of performance to get that portability and to get that futuristic nature. So you might end up not getting the best performance. Nonetheless, if you get 70% of the peak of your hardware, it is definitely something to start with. You don't need to learn a new language or new constructs. If you want to get more control over many of the aspects of your parallelism, you could look at directive-based programming. We have already gone in this lecture through OpenMP. OpenMP is one of the directive-based programming, or also called as developer-assisted programming, which means you as a programmer are assisting the compiler via special instructions called as directives or special compiler hints telling that I want to take more control and I want to tell explicitly to the compiler that what loop I want to make parallel. Directive-based programming provides you additional constructs which might not be present in the standard language. Like the standard language basically does not allow you data directives. I told you CPU and GPU memory are different. If you want to take control of that data transfers, it is not provided in the language. They're primarily dependent on unified memory as a concept which I told you some time back, where they leave it up to the driver to transfer the memory wherever it is required. That's why it may or may not perform. While directives gives you that additional control, but still directives are not lower level, which means they are not hardware specific. You don't need to know the hardware characteristics to write using directive. They still can give you good performance without having to learn a lot or deal about your lower level hardware level details. That's one thing about directives, especially if you have millions of lines of code like our legacy codes, like if you have lots or lots of code, you cannot manually go ahead and change almost everything to parallel in nature and understand based on the hardware and make it also portable at the same time. Performance portability is something which is very difficult to achieve, and directive frameworks like OpenACC are very good at doing that. Even OpenMP 4.5 and above, they also support heterogeneous computing, which I talked to you some time back, and there is an implementation in our compiler HPC stack. If you have OpenMP 4.5 and you are using offload concept, in that case, it can also target GPUs, definitely. On the right hand side extreme, what you see is if you want to get the maximum performance and you are not concerned about the portability part, in that case, you can definitely write your code by understanding the hardware architecture using CUDA C or CUDA Fortran or CUDA Python. There are different ways in which you can target the GPU taking more control. So what I'm showing you here is the overall landscape of n ways to GPU programming. Which one will you use will be dependent on your needs. If you have already decided that if you have a GPU based system and you want to get the best performance, you can definitely choose the approach of writing lower level construct, understanding the hardware architecture. But you do also have this choice of having some intermediate of performance portability by choosing this approach. In fact, in real world, my suggestion to everyone is that you can mix and match. They are not exclusive, they are not mutually exclusive, which means like suppose in your application, you had 10 functions. Out of that 10 functions, 9 functions could be written either via standard directives or via pragmas so that you can target them. But there might be 1 or 2 functions which are critical, which are called as critical functions, which take majority of the time, and you can write only for those functions lower level construct so that you are keeping 90% of your code still performance portable, but one part which you know for sure can give you the maximum performance, you basically can write a lower level construct. And there is interoperability which is defined between all three of them. So you can still write the code in one and transfer the data and write another one also and interoperate with each other. And that's the beauty about n ways to GPU programming, that you can do all those things and mix and match them based on the requirement of your application. Let's take an example so that you get an idea of what I am saying. The same example which I showed you some time back. If you are doing this operation called as DAXP or DAXP, which is based on single precision or double precision, what you're doing is you're multiplying a scalar value alpha to a vector x, adding it to another vector y, and storing it in z. This is the most common routine in BLAS. And if you were to do this operation, one of the operations that you can do is you can make use of directive-based programming. If time permits, I will be showing you a demo of how to make use of directives but this will give you an overview of how it works. This was my sequential code, which is for I equal to 0. There's some part missing here, but don't worry about it. What you're doing is a star x plus y. So if you had a loop which is sequential in nature, if you use a profiler, it would have told you that this function is taking a lot of time, and particularly you are interested in this loop. In that case, you can just add a pragma or a specialized hint in C or in Fortran, like ACC kernel, and it gives a hint to the compiler that compiler, I want to run this code in parallel, and hence create a parallel code for you. So this way, you can basically convert your sequential application to write parallel code and target the hardware. Second option for you would be that if you knew that there was already a library which is called as cuBLAS, you could have just replaced a sequential BLAS call, which is all there is already a library of BLAS calls in the sequential world, also or a CPU library with the equivalent GPU called from cuBLAS, and the name of the routine is AXP, and you would be able to see that you will be able to do the same operation using some functionality which is provided in the routine. Along with that, you will have to initialize and shut down also. Some additional calls needs to be done so that you are initializing the memory and then deinitializing it as well. But the same operation could have been done with a library call. Or if you are a C programmer, you could understand some of the additional constructs. Like on the left hand side, you are seeing a sample C code like StackSP here, and you are doing a for loop and you're doing yi equal to a star xi plus yi. Same thing you could do and convert and run on a GPU by appending this function with the additional keyword called as global. Once you append this, this tells to the compiler that this function is supposed to run on parallel on the GPU, and please compile this code for CUDA and not for the x86 or say the other ARM based CPU that you have. And you can control when you run this in parallel which thread accesses what data based on the indexing. You would have seen in the OpenMP and MPI that MPI gets its own index. In OpenMP also every thread gets its own index. Similarly in the CUDA world also you can get your own index, and when you run this you can decide which thread accesses what data and you can take more control over it. And you can see here I can call this function AXP which is going to run on the GPU, and the number of threads I am going to launch is 4096 into 256. So I am talking about launching threads at that level. Obviously GPU is a massively parallel architecture. You won't use it for doing operation of only say 100 elements or 200 elements. It's like killing a fly with a cannon. You would like to use it for a massively parallel job and not for something which is very simple in nature. So once you append it, you take control of how many threads you will launch, which thread accesses what data, and take control of your data copies because your GPU and CPU memory is different. And that's the only thing which might be required for you to run and take control of the parallelism by using parallel C. Or the same thing is there in Fortran. The same concept which I showed you in C can be done in Fortran by using a module called as CUDA4. Once you use this module, you can call a subroutine with a special attribute called as global and take control of which thread accesses what data based on the indexing and launch this with additional number of threads that I talked to you. So a sequential CUDA Fortran can be converted onto a parallel Fortran by taking additional control. You can see why it can give you more performance, because you are taking control of the number of threads and also taking control of which thread accesses what data, and you can end up with more performance. If you are in the Python world, it's still the same thing. It's still the same thing. Like if you were having a routine called as AXP, you can append that definition of that routine and say that I want to target CUDA and say vectorize. So you are using a module inside here called a Numba. Numba is basically supporting NVIDIA GPUs, and if you're writing a Python code, you can just say target CUDA and do the same operation, and there will be a JIT compilation which will compile this code on the target CUDA hardware for you. You can see here the same thing can happen in the Python environment also. What about C++? I told you sometime back that you can use standard C++ language. If you are a STL programmer in the C++ world, all of you would know that STL basically provides certain functionalities in which you can use C++ constructs and do operations. In the sequential world, you will just say transform and do this operation of 2 star. This is your alpha and you are working on two vectors, which is 1 and 2, which is x and y vector here, which are defined like this. Same thing you can do using the same STL, but just add one more parameter to it called as std execution par, which means you are telling that I want to run this operation on the parallel. And it is left up to the implementation of the compiler that you use, and it will start targeting the GPU hardware using parallel STL, which is the standard language itself. And you are not learning anything new, you are using the same standard language compilers. If you are a MATLAB programmer, the same thing can work. In a MATLAB, if you are having a PCT toolbox, which means parallel computing toolbox, if you have a license in MATLAB, you can create something called as parpool. Parpool basically generates multiple threads, and you can do the same operation that I just talked to you about using par_for operator. And if you have a GPU on the system, MATLAB will basically run this operation in parallel on the GPU. Or MATLAB basically, MATLAB toolbox basically provides GPU implementation for most of the routines which are present, whether it is signal processing, communication, neural network, image processing. There are equivalent functions in MATLAB which can run on the GPU. The only thing you have to do is you have to declare your MATLAB array as a GPU array, and it will start, right? There will be a CUDA equivalent code behind the scenes to run it. So what I wanted to show to you was the ecosystem of the GPU. Like you have a large options which are present on the GPU, on the CPU side, the same thing exists on the GPU, and you can choose the method based on the necessity, based on the amount of effort that you want to choose, and write a parallel code on the GPU. And I'm going to maybe quickly show you a demo of this, but before that, I wanted to show and talk to you about one more thing with respect to the software stack itself, which is usage of containers. Nowadays, all maintaining the clusters or maintaining or writing, and we also do publish a lot of softwares nowadays, right? So if you are writing a lot of papers nowadays, if you have done certain work, you will publish it in some form or the other, like you might put it on the open source like on GitHub and all. How many of you have tried to replicate the work done by somebody else? And how many of us have failed? All of us know that part. The reason behind that is when a researcher or somebody works on a particular thing, they would have a particular stack in mind, like a particular version of GCC, a particular version of MPI, a particular version of FFT. All these combinations when the experiments were basically created. And when somebody else wants to do that same replication on their respective hardware, respective stack, you might end up failing and not replicating the work of the original researcher. The same thing gets complicated when you have different combinations, permutations and combinations. The new clusters are becoming more and more complicated, like you might need this version of Caffe, TensorFlow, FFT, OpenMPI, MVPH and all. And all that combinations for your software can create a lot of problems. That's where containers comes into the picture, where basically you are keeping your bare minimal system, and over that you can basically contain all of your software stack and publish it for anyone who would like to replicate your work. And these are called as containers. Containers can be thought of as virtual machines, but lightweight virtual machines. All of us would have heard about cloud and how virtualization has changed this industry, where you can reuse the existing hardware, bare metal, and still at the same time refresh it without having to do any kind of installation. That's the beauty about virtualization, where you have your operating system, then you have certain hypervisor, and your app basically runs in your own operating system, guest OS. So you can have within the same hardware two applications, one of them using Ubuntu, another using CentOS, and still running on the same hardware at the same time via virtualization. Containers are basically lightweight virtualization because they kind of share the same operating system. So basically they share the same host operating system and they don't run their own guest operating system. They are lightweight, and that's why one of the key thing about containers also is that whatever results you get when you run on a bare metal system on a cluster, it is supposed to be the same when you run it inside a container. So now you can package everything that your application requires in a container and share it with anyone. Like today, if I was creating astrophysics code and it required XYZ things, I can package it in a container and run it on my machine. Tomorrow, if you want to run it on a cloud, you can run it on a cloud environment as well, or you can run it on the NSM system if you were supporting the containers. That's one advantage of having a container. And I would like to come back to it and show you maybe a very quick demo in a bit by running a demo for you of a containers very quickly. Just give me a second. Let me just prepare it. Sorry about this. I'm just taking some time for you, but let me again share the screen. So let me just quickly show you one of my system where I have a GPU installed, and my system basically has, you can check, I have a couple of GPUs. I have a Quadro GV100, which is a Volta architecture, GV100 Volta architecture, and there's one for basically driving the display. And via NVIDIA-SMI command, I can basically see what driver version is there, what CUDA version is there, and basically what I'm trying to do is that my system is bare metal, which means I don't have any kind of a software installed on my system. I just have the driver and the container which I just talked to you about. What I can do is that I'm basically going to run a particular command which is going to fetch in something which I'm going to talk about in a bit. I am using a container called as Docker, and I'm saying it that I want to use all the GPUs, and I'm going to call it that I want to use a particular container which is called as Envase, on which I'm going to show you a demo. So you can see as in it has basically pulled in the container from somewhere. Now I will tell you where that somewhere is, and it started running this lab. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to access this lab here. So I'm going to say localhost colon 8888, and I'm going to access this lab here, which is localhost colon 8888. And I'm basically doing the same thing. I'm running on the server. It's just that now I am running this lab for you to in a browser environment here. So what I wanted to show you was that I basically didn't have any installation, and I pulled in a container which was in an app store which is called as ngc.nvidia.com. So let's give an analogy, right? Nowadays you use Android phones, or you basically use phones like an iPad or something like that, right? So if I were to install anything on my Apple phone or on my Android phone, do you ever see, have you ever done something like this? That, okay, I go to the App Store, I download the GitHub source code and all the dependencies, and then I compile it on my Android device, and then basically try to make it work and run. No. What do? You go to an app store, that app store basically already has a container. If you see, Java is actually a virtual environment, it already has a container. You just say fetch and it starts running in a virtual environment of Java, which is what is being used as part of Android, or in case of Apple it would be something else, right? So that's why installation or usage of application and testing has become really easy. Same thing, NVIDIA has created an app store of high performance computing, any of these things which are available online, which is called as NGC or NVIDIA GPU Cloud. And when I ran it on my system, I just said pull that container from. I was telling you about the container which is called as HPC SDK. So I can just search HPC SDK in this platform and you will see that there is already a container here called as NVIDIA HPC SDK, and it will tell you the command which I have to run to do. I just ran docker run and docker pull, and it basically took all that content which was required for me for running this Envays, which I wanted to show to you, and it just pulled it from there and it started running on the machine without having to do any kind of installation or packaging that was there. That's one of the key things about this container based environment, that you can create your work and publish it in the form of a container so that anybody else would be able to use it in a way that which is much more easier to replicate, and you can basically transfer it to any other system without having to do any kind of installation on the other systems. That is one of the key advantage of using a container based environment. Now let me just switch, if the time permits, I will show you one of the porting methods, which is OpenACC. But I wanted to definitely touch on one more point later on and start taking questions. And if time permits later on, I will cover one of the methods, which is OpenACC, which is very similar to using OpenMP also. One of the new methods, I would say, parallel computing or high performance computing is a way of you accelerating the existing simulations and writing parallel codes. But that does not mean is the only way to accelerate your application. There are other ways also. Like if I were to say that I wanted to sort an application, sort a vector, I have multiple ways, right? I can sort an application using bubble sort, quick sort, heap sort, and bitonic sort. There are other kinds of sorts, each of them having its own thing. One of them is more parallel in nature, another is not, right? Similarly, there is a new method which have been devised, which is used, and it is basically artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is basically an algorithm, I would say in simple terms, which has its own characteristics, and the question which every researcher is trying to solve at this point of time, no matter what domain it is, whether it is astrophysics, astronomy, whether it is computational fluid dynamics or whatever it is, the question which we are telling is this. What we were doing earlier is that we have certain input. I have some mathematical first principle based on which I have already proven theoretically that if I apply this particular way of writing code, then the output which I am going to get is basically sound and proven. And who creates these methods? Researchers like you. They basically devise new algorithms and prove them mathematically, right? And these is what, and then finally, this is proven in maths. Then what do? Then somebody, a computer person or the scientist will go ahead and implement that mathematical things in the way the computer or the language implements. As you would know that you cannot exactly write those mathematical implementation, so you end up doing some level of approximation when somebody writes that code. You end up writing certain number of approximation and you have a code which now runs. You take an input and it provides an output within a limit. Because first of all, your computers cannot even represent infinite numbers, right? While your mathematical, what you prove is actually kind of proven in a way that it accounts into many things, right? So that's the level of accuracy. So you will end up losing out on certain parts within a particular limit that you have defined. The question is, can we change this level of approximation that we are telling by certain method? And that method is what we are proposing is, can we shift it to a feature engineering based or neural network based porting strategy? Can we do that approximation using neural networks or using artificial intelligence? And that's the problem that we are trying to say. Can it work? Can this work? Absolutely yes, because of a theorem which has been called, which is called as universal approximation theorem. What this theorem says is that if you have a contiguous signal, there is definitely a way for a neural network to basically approximate a signal. That's what universal approximation theorem tells. So you can have a different way, you can have different kinds of neural networks, you can define a way in which you will be able to represent this contiguous signal using a neural network. Theoretically, it works, but practically, it's a useless theorem unless you are able to prove that it works, right? And that's what is the new way. Is it worth it? Definitely, it is worth it because the amount of speed ups that you can get by using a neural network is not in the form of 10x or 20x or 40x, it's in the form of 1000x to 10,000x. So you can basically get the amount of runs, so you don't do the simulations again and again. The amount of speedups that you can expect by employing a neural network is in 10,000x and at that level, which means if you're doing your simulations in weeks, it can get reduced in few seconds if you were able to prove and use it inside your simulation environment. So the idea is the way neural networks work is in different fashion. So what we are saying is that generally when you have been doing simulation from the past 40 years, 80 years and all, you already have a lot of input data and you already have an output for it, which means you have a proven output. The way neural network work is that you give them this label data, which is your output, and you give them your input, and you define a loss function in a way that your neural network can understand this behavior on representing this data. Basically, it should be able to somehow understand those equations that you have written on its own rather than you explicitly writing them. And that's what neural network is very good at doing. Now, how does this loss function or boundary conditions or whatever is written is a different question. We cannot go in this session on how that happens. There are two worlds there, data-driven approach or physics-informed neural network approach. In the physics-informed neural network approach, you can define your loss function in form of, and you can define your boundary conditions or loss functions in the way you would like to define in the real world, the way you are doing your simulations also. While in the data-driven approach, they will use normal loss functions which may not be numerically accurate maybe. That's a different question altogether. But since you already have input data and output data, you are already proven. The idea is, can we train a neural network which can do this approximation for you? And that's the problem which the community is trying to talk about. It definitely has an advantage, and there are certain disadvantages also, like how do you prove the uncertainty which can come? Can you prove that it will work in all the conditions or not? For which you have to define different kinds of neural networks, like Fourier neural networks and all those things like that. But it is definitely interesting field because you can get speed ups at the number which none of the parallel computing world alone can provide you. And it's not necessary for you to replace your whole simulation with a neural network. You can just replace one part of it and have your rest all parts running in a traditional simulation environment and still make it work. So it's the convergence of high performance computing and artificial intelligence is what is the new norm to get to the level of the computation that you would ideally like to have in exaflop level of systems. And since this is an astrophysics and astronomy thing, I would like to show you an example of it on how it was used in your field. All of us know that gravitational waves were proven. Nobel Prize was also provided to the scientists who did that. And if you see, this work which was done as part of LIGO basically consisted of one of the applications of using artificial intelligence. As we all know, we are in this field here, we are all accumulated as part of this. But as you would know, the amount of data which is now getting collected by these different devices is huge. And if you want to actually do anything with this data, it's the amount of computation requirements is very huge. And most of this data has noise inside it. So what was done actually, you can go ahead and read it, but you can see Enable of DL provided 5000x faster filtering. So the part which was accelerated using deep learning was the noise filtration. It was not the actual simulation, but to remove the noise which is at the initial stages, because the amount of data, if you apply to that whole data of filtering and removing the noise, you would not be able to do it at the level which was required to denoise and find these gravitational waves. So the neural network was basically as given as one of the input to your simulation, which is a convolution layer, to remove that noise. It acted like a filter before the actual application actually started. And that's what is one of the key aspect of doing parallel computation, but also employing some other techniques where you can see here it's saying at the real time basically gravitational waves are detected, right? Which otherwise would have not been possible at that particular point of time. And this is very, very critical for anybody working in this field, is that you can use parallel computing, but changing, thinking parallel and deploying the right algorithm is also very, very critical to the success of the research work that you are doing. So in short, all models are wrong, whether it is simulation or not, but some are useful, and the one that works for you is the one that you would like to use. There is another example that I would like to show that we have worked. So we have been working with NCRA for quite some time, even with IUCAA for some time. We have been very, very fortunate enough to work with them, and there are different papers where we accelerated the application along with the scientists for NCRA and also with IUCAA in terms of accelerating their application for the GMRT, which you would have seen Professor Yashwant Gupta, he also presented this. So with that, I believe we have a couple of minutes for taking questions. So I would, in case time permits later, I can show you a quick demo of writing a parallel code also. But otherwise, I think I can take some of the questions now. I've been speaking continuously. I see raise of hands. Would the moderators help me in asking?
I think that Shantanu, please mute yourself and ask question.
Can you hear me? Okay. A very basic question. So let's say if I have a workstation, how do I check if I have GPU compatible hardware on that system? Because I think I can just run GPU code. So what is the command to check it? Sorry, it's a very basic question, because I think what you mentioned earlier, some Linux workstation also has some GPU hardware built in. So
the most basic command just to check if you have a NVIDIA GPU there or not is, in case you have a Linux, you can just type a command called as lspci. lspci basically checks for all the devices which are connected to a PCI Express bus. So you would be able to, if you see a name NVIDIA there, which means you do have a graphics processor there. Another command which I just showed some time back when I was showing the demo is NVIDIA-SMI. NVIDIA-SMI is a command which will tell you if you have the right set of drivers to install it or not. You have installed to make use of GPUs or not. So These two ways you can check whether you have a GPU on your system, and if you have a GPU, have you installed the right software. If not, we have a lot of open source material just to see if how to make use of CUDA on the GPUs, and I'll be happy later on to provide some links.
Thank you.
I will be happy to take more questions if any.
Yes, Shraddha, please unmute yourself and ask question.
Thank you, Somnath. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so Bharat, thank you for that session. Actually, I have one question from the applications aspect. All of the high performance computing applications that runs, say, on an on-prem cluster, is it possible to run all of those via containerization on a cloud? Is that possible?
It is definitely possible. Containers as a solution obviously provides you the virtual environment. The only thing is the cluster admins should be able to install the container for you, right? If you are an admin, generally like in a cluster environment, the most prominent thing which is available for anyone to use is modules.
Correct.
So admin will install and then the user just says module load.
Correct.
Right? So similarly, you can install a container environment either called as Docker or Singularity, and then the admin doesn't have to install anything. You can submit a job via Slurm, and your Slurm job would be Docker run, and it will pull the container for you and run it. Or you can create your local own container repository on your in your head node. So it's definitely possible. The only thing is the admin has to install something called as container runtime like Docker or Singularity.
On the cloud environment, is that what you're saying, right?
On a cluster, it's not cloud, right? It's just your bare metal cluster. He just needs to install container. But
Okay,
yes, on the cloud cloud vendors already provide container. I'm talking about a cluster where you don't have a cloud ecosystem to schedule all those things.
Okay. I see. Okay. Thank you, Bharat.
Anybody else? Any question? May raise your hand. Yeah, you may please unmute and speak.
Hello, Bharat.
Yeah.
Good evening. Yeah. So thank you, Bharat, for the lovely presentation out there. I am a student and I am about to start my dissertation in a few months, and this looks pretty overwhelming to me from the point that I never had an experience in HPC. So what would you recommend? Where do I start with the basics so that at least I could do some of these in my project in the upcoming months?
That's a very good question, and I would rather like to give it to the organizers. But what I can say is that as part of National Supercomputing Mission, in fact, along with all the HPC nodal centers like IIT Kharagpur, who is also one of the hosts for this particular event, we do various hands-on sessions for the participants because no matter what training we give or no matter how many presentations we give, unless you start applying it to your own application or do some hands-on, the learning exercise is always going to be a difficult thing, right? So with NSM, we conduct these regular boot camps where you can do these hands-on exercises and learn the thing and start then looking at on how it can be applied for your domain, right? So that's one part of it, and NSM kind of publishes all these boot camps and it keeps on happening very regularly. Apart from that, from NVIDIA side also, all of this material that we do or what we teach, in fact, what I was showing you as a demo, is all present open source on a GitHub repository. And you would be able to download all of them and start learning on all of these concepts on your own if you would like to, I'll be happy to provide some of these links later on where you can go through some of this theory on the theory part as well, if you'd like. That's what I can say, but I would request Professor Pavitra Mitra, Somnath Roy, and
Yeah,
also
yeah.
to talk about it.
So what we plan to do is that I'll be in touch with you, Bharat, after the workshop. We want to we also want to make a Git page where we'll link to this. Also in the website for this workshop, we'll provide link to all these resources. So my request to all the participants is please follow the website of the workshop. As soon as the workshop is over, we will put up all the resources, all the content, everything on the website. So, and if it is beyond that, of course, you have to directly contact the speakers if it is beyond that. But the basic material that is taught, we'll give link to all of them. So Bharat, my kind request is I'll be in touch with you. I will take your advice to get all the material, put them together in the web page.
Sure.
Other